this session. So I want to welcome everybody. My name is Belinda Christensen. I'm one of the advisors in the Study Abroad Office, Education Abroad and Overseas Campuses here at Temple. I'm really happy to see all the names and faces today. I want to thank you for joining us for this panel discussion, which is called Language Learning, Cultural Humility, and Empathy. And it's part of the Global Reach, Global Teach, a celebration of International Education Week here at Temple University. And as we're all aware, this global pandemic has really heightened our need for global collaboration to solve global problems. And it's also delivered unprecedented challenges to international education and student mobility. Temple University has an advantage in having campuses on 3 different continents. We have Temple Japan in Asia, Temple Rome in Europe, and main campus here in Philadelphia, as well as partners around the world. So we have, really Temple has a truly global reach. So as our international leaders discussed at the opening panel on Monday, Temple's campuses pivoted really quickly and worked together throughout this year to provide continued services and education to our students, especially through technology. Our events this week demonstrate ways that we can use technology to foster intercultural learning, bringing together the diverse perspectives of faculty experts and students from across our campuses. So this session is a perfect example of that goal as we bring together study abroad students and international students who have all learned various languages while studying either on our study abroad programs or studying as international students here on our main campus. So during this discussion, our audience, you can feel free to enter your questions in the chat. And we'll be monitoring those, but we're also going to have a Q&A, an open Q&A at the end. So if we don't get to your question as you're asking it, we'll do our best to get as many questions answered as we can at the end. So now, if we just want to go to the next slide, I want to turn things over to our amazing panelists, our students who have been all over the world studying all sorts of different things, but one thing they all have in common is their study of language. So if you could all of our student panelists, if you could each introduce yourselves and tell us, where are you from? What are you studying in general? But I'm particularly interested to know what is your native language, or what are your native languages, and what languages have you spent time studying? So I'll let you all take it away.
Hi, everyone. My name is Liam. I'm from Bucks County, Pennsylvania. I'm a junior at Temple. I'm dually enrolled in a 4+1 master's program in secondary education in world foreign languages. I recently started studying Italian on main campus, but my time abroad has been spent in Quito, Ecuador in 2019, and also in Oviedo, Spain in this past spring, studying Spanish. And my native language is English.
Great, thank you.
Hi guys, my name's Ivy. I'm a global studies major with a poli-sci minor.
Oh, Ivy, I don't want to interrupt you, but I can't hear you very well.
Oh, can you hear me now?
A little bit better. Let's see. Sorry. I think if you speak up, then we'll be okay.
Okay. So is this volume okay?
Yep.
Okay. So hi, my name's Ivy. I'm a global studies major with a poli-sci minor, and I studied abroad at Temple University, Japan in 2019. I have a background in Cantonese and English, and I studied Japanese, Korean, and I recently started French.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Zaria Glenn. I'm a senior English and Spanish double major. I studied abroad with Liam in the last program in Quito in spring of 2019. And then this past spring, I was in Alicante, Spain for a couple months. My native language is English, but I speak Spanish fluently and I'm trying to learn French as well. I'm also a study abroad ambassador.
Good evening or afternoon, everyone. My name is Hoa. I'm an international student, come from Vietnam. So basically, I'm studying abroad in the US. I know that my name is a little bit difficult for people who not speak Vietnamese, gonna be weird about it. My name sounds like surprise. So when you surprise, you say Hoa. That is my name. So easy way for you to remember. I graduated this year in the College of Public Health for the major public health also. And before that, I studied Vietnamese cultures and tourism management before I actually came to the US. And now I'm in my master programs for health informatics and also for a master of public health in the same college. And my native language, Azure Vietnamese. I learned English when I came here, and a little bit before that, I spent 6 months to study Korean.
Excellent, thank you.
Nice to meet you all.
You too.
Hi, everybody. My name is Ryan Rimajaya. I'm a senior environmental studies major with a minor in visual anthropology. I'm originally from Washington, D.C. Last semester, I studied in southeastern Kenya, studying wildlife conservation and the relationship between Western conservationists and the indigenous group there, the Maasai people. I spent time learning Kiswahili and Kima, and then I've also spent a lot of my free time in Indonesia photographing wild orangutans, and I spent time learning Bahasa Indonesia there.
Hello, my name is Oluwatosi Bankole. You can call me Tosin for short. Everyone calls me Tosin. I'm originally from Nigeria, West Africa. My native language is Yoruba. I know it's a mouthful, but it's pretty easy to learn. I speak English. I can also speak some French, but I probably will not. I'm not too good with it, but I speak some of it. I'm a neuroscience major and I'm a senior. I graduate next year, May, and I've had the opportunity to go to Israel to study the culture and the language for a bit, but and that's about it. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Vittoria. I am an accounting and management information system double major. I am from Rome, Italy, and obviously Italian is my native language. I can also speak, obviously I've spent time learning English, and I also study Spanish and French.
Hi guys, my name is Alishka, but I just go by Ellie, and I am an international business major with concentration in marketing. I'm a junior, and I'm actually an international student, and I was born and raised in Prague, Czech Republic, so I can fluently speak 3 languages, which are Czech, Slovak, and English. I've also been studying Spanish for 7 years, and last fall I studied in Seoul in Korea at the Hankuk University of Foreign Studies, and that's where I started learning Korean.
Hi everyone, my name is Fernando Gagio. I'm from Mexico. I grew up speaking Spanish as well as English because I came to the US when I was really young. I've studied a little bit of French in the past, much less than everybody here, I'm sure. And I've had the pleasure of going to study for a tiny bit in Italy and Greece. But yeah, that's it.
Great. Thank you all for being here. And again, thank you to our audience for coming. So to kick us off, I'm just wondering, I'd love to hear from you, from our panelists, about what have been some of the biggest challenges that you've faced while learning another language. So we can just kind of do, anybody jump in as you like.
I would say that for me, it was being insecure, like about my accent and like about like when I have to actually speak, because I feel like when learning a new language, starting to learn and understand comes easier and faster than actually having to talk. And like, it's a little bit awkward, you make mistakes, and it's just I used to be very anxious about like when like making mistakes when talking English. And like now that when I live in Korea, it kind of like those memories started coming back, because I was like, oh, I remember what it felt like, because now I'm like learning another language all over again.
Does that resonate with any of the
Yeah, I completely agree with Ellie. And for me, like pronunciation was the biggest issues, and also being understood, because I could understand everyone else, but for me, the communication, like at first, it was difficult. Maybe because I felt insecure, but then with time and like with spending time with my American friends and going to classes, I think that really helped me develop my self-esteem and then just try to communicate.
Just like Victoria said, it's also the pronunciation and the accents. Because I learned some English back in Nigeria before coming over to America, and then I discovered that some of the things I pronounce is pronounced an entirely different way in America, or it's known as something else. Like I made a joke with my friends that my sister was like, I can't remember the English I used, but then they thought I meant that she was actually hurting me, and I was like, no, I didn't mean that. I mean she was just teasing me. So things like that can either make you very, very conscious of what you're saying, and then you have to actually think about it more than once to see, okay, am I saying the right word right now? Does this mean something else, or can they think it means something else? So that's one of my experiences.
Going off,
like, oh, go ahead, Zaria.
I was saying, going off the point of pronunciation, I think especially in Spanish, there's different dialects everywhere. So I studied in Spain and then in Ecuador, and the accents are very different. So something my Spanish host dad would say was very different or hard to like train my ear to understand what he was saying versus the dialect and the accent used in Ecuador. So that was, it kind of took some weeks to get used to just hearing words sound differently in the pace and things of that nature.
For me, I think the most challenging and difficult is going to be how you practice it. For example, when I don't say to people that I learned French for 3 years, because I don't remember about that anymore. When I was in high school, like a long time ago, when I was in my country. So I learned about French with my friends who didn't speak French. So which means I used to learn that language in the environment where nobody else around me speak that language, so that I can practice it. So that is the point. When you don't have the practical experience with that, you don't improve it over time, and you tend to use the language when you talk more. And when, for example, when I learned English, when I came to the US, I have my friends around and we communicate by that way. And by communicating, I hear what other people say. I learn how they say that and how they apply it in the environmental factor that the situation apply in that language, and the increase in the language ability of a person can learn over time and over time in the environment where everybody speak the language that I learned.
I think for me, can everyone hear me now?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
For me, one of the most difficult things that I had to face while learning different languages was learning things that English doesn't have. For example, in Japanese, there's a more respectful like speech style that you have to use called keigo. And in keigo, you have to use completely different vocab and grammar when talking to someone who's higher in authority than you. But we don't have that in English. So that was difficult to wrap my head around at first.
Yeah, I think you're all touching on, some of the challenges, but some of the things that make learning a language so interesting, right? Those expectations about even pronunciation, and when you read something or you learn a word from somebody who might not speak the language in the same way where you're going to be studying the language, and then you get there and you're like, wait, it's pronounced like that? Are you serious? So, I think so many of you have touched on kind of the the value of studying a language where it's spoken, or in different places where it is spoken. I wonder, if Tosin, you mentioned a story, but I wonder if any of you have other stories about times when you had, a miscommunication that was you know, either funny or a lot of times, you know, these things can be embarrassing, but in retrospect, they're really funny and even sometimes help us, you know, be closer to the people that we're trying to communicate with. Does anybody have stories about language mishaps that you'd like to share?
I have
Sure.
a story.
Sorry.
Okay, really quick. I mean, when we were in Quito, Ecuador, my friends and I, we were out to eat, and my friend has a nut allergy. And that's a very important thing to like know how to translate, especially when you're like going abroad. We were in like Baños, Ecuador, which is much smaller than Quito. And honestly, I forget, like we were saying nuez, but you know, we wanted to say something else. And it turns out that they like cooked her food in like peanut oil. And then, I mean, I guess this shows the importance of, you know, kind of knowing that stuff. It's not necessarily funny, but I mean, it was definitely a learning experience. Luckily, she like doesn't have a severe allergy. But then I got the experience of going to the pharmacy down the road and explaining her symptoms. And you know, they were asking all these questions to us, and of course, like in Spanish, they didn't speak English. But that was a really unique experience.
Yeah, some of that vocabulary, right, it can be so different even though it's the same language. Yeah, I have a nut allergy, so I'm always really concerned about that when I go to other countries. Ryan, I know you had a story too.
Yeah, when I showed up in Kenya last January, a lot of the staff who worked on the camp that I was staying at didn't speak Swahili or English. They spoke Kima. So our professors told us, you know, a lot of the ways that you're going to get around these kind of being stuck with your language skills is to do a lot of body language. And so I actually used this because a snake had made its way into where I slept and I needed their help. So I just had to gesture out the like snake motions. And then that led to like a half an hour of them teaching me different animal names so that I could come get them if I needed help.
Wow.
I also
These
remember
stories are like giving me anxiety, but go ahead, Ellie.
it was like at the beginning of my study abroad semester when one of my friends, she wanted to take me out for this dessert called binsu, which is pretty much it's shaved ice. It's like type of a like an ice cream, but I didn't realize she was saying it in Korean, like it was like a Korean dish, and the whole time I thought she was saying a bean soup. So this whole time I thought like we were going for a bean soup, and she was taking me to like this ice cream place. I was like, this is such an odd place. Like they're making ice cream and bean soups. Like what a weird mix of like, this is like the weirdest business I've met. She's like, no, like it's a dessert.
That's funny. That's a good one. I love that. What else? So, you know, I sometimes also, you know, when you're, I know this has happened to me before, when you just get to a point where you feel like you've kind of reached an impasse with being able to being able to communicate with people. Have you ever had that kind of circumstance where you were really trying to get something across and it wasn't working and you had to kind of think outside of the box a little bit for how to get your point across?
Actually, I have a story for that one too. My life is just full of stories. I was trying to register for a class and I was pronouncing the class the way I know how to pronounce it, but she just wasn't getting it. And I didn't take offense to that because I definitely know I have some accent somewhere in my voice. And all I did was just write it down and show her this is what I mean. And I realized that that was very, very effective. And most times now, well, I've like my English has improved a little bit. But most times now, whenever I go somewhere, I always go, if I'm going to school, whatever, I go with a pen and paper on my phone so I can just type it down and write it and show you this is what I need. I don't mean to be rude, but if you can like just read this. But yeah, it's fun to like talk about it now. Those times I was like, okay, I don't know what to do now. I'm freaking out, she's freaking out. But with time it gets better and then you can say stories like this every time.
Yeah, some of these stories are funnier in retrospect, right? Maybe stressful at the time.
Yeah, I have another funny story too. when I was a freshman, I went with a friend of mine to Cozy here on campus to get some food. And on the menu there was a squiggle, but I didn't know what that was at the time. It's basically a square bagel, and I couldn't pronounce it. So when I was really curious to try it, so I was trying to order it, but the person that was working there couldn't understand me. And then she called the manager, and I was so embarrassed because I was still pronouncing the word the way I thought it was supposed to be pronounced. And then the end of the story is that this squiggle, they only have it for breakfast. So, and I was there for dinner. So I went through all this embarrassment for nothing.
So after all that,
Yeah.
oh man. And so that kind of touches too on some cultural differences, right? That you see something on a menu and you think, okay, well, as long as I can pronounce this, I can order it right. But then there's this surprise of like, well, actually, that is a breakfast item and couldn't possibly be eaten for dinner. Great. So what do you all think about I think a lot of you studied the language, studied another language before you went to the country where you continued to study it. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what are some of the benefits of studying a language in a country where that language is spoken widely.
I would say that you get more practical knowledge. So I'm a Spanish major, so I spend a lot of time reading literature or having really political or analytical conversations. But I got to my various host countries and I realized I didn't know how to say things like cup or napkin or really basic words, but I could talk about neoliberalism. So it was a bit of a culture shock to realize that I needed to learn like silverware or like doorway or simple words, because I think school prepares you to have really advanced conversations, and then being in the culture, being with locals, being with your family helps you just learn everyday language, which was really, really useful.
Absolutely agree on that. And I think, as I said before, the experience when I study a language in my country where nobody speaks that language, and the experience when I study that language in the country where everybody else speak the language is really different. You learn from that, and also really interesting, because before I didn't know like what a hit me up mean or break your leg mean until like I actually studied something related to that, and I was like, okay, before I just like break your leg, why do you say that? It's so unlucky if you break your leg. But actually, when it applied to a specific situation, it totally makes sense for the people in that situation.
I think there's like a different level of motivation between the class and then actually like living in a different country. Like with Liam, it wasn't just about getting an A. He had to go get the medication for his friend who had like an allergic reaction. So you have to learn the language or you won't get around. It's not just about, practicing with your friends. So you have to like step it up if you want to keep moving.
I think a really interesting thing is kind of like there's no escape. Like sometimes you're going to be forced to use the language, which is something that's, a syllabus can say all at once that like Spanish is required. It's like you can only speak Spanish, but at the end of the day, the majority of professors, if you say one word in English, like they're gonna understand what you're saying. But when you're abroad, you're forced to circle around words, and you're forced to find like a different way to say something. And I think that also brings kind of like a layer of vulnerability that like you don't really get in a classroom, because you're really putting yourself out there. Because as soon as like my friend told me that like I say hola weirdly, and I was like, what do you mean I say hola? Like he's like, I hear your accent when you say hola, and I was like, oh well, geez, like that's a dead giveaway. But it's kind of like it's a whole new sense of being vulnerable, which is a really good it's a really unique experience to have that I'm really grateful for.
What do you think, what would your advice be for a student who is thinking about studying abroad and wondering if they should include language study when they study abroad? What do you think are the benefits of, what do you think studying language adds to your study of another culture?
I think that it like really helps one to understand the culture better. Like especially when like you're like you learn like Hua said, like he like now understand what like break a leg means. Like that's like part of the culture, like understanding like the lingo of it and like the way people like talk. Like what I noticed about myself is, for example, that like joking is very different in each language. Like the way I joke in English and the way I joke back home, like I'm funny in each language, whatever, but the way I joke is like different, like it like the way people like what people find funny is different. And like that's also part of the culture. So like I feel like if you really want to truly immerse into the culture of the like host country, studying the language is like only for the benefit of it.
Yeah, I completely. Oh, go ahead.
You could go first. No, it's okay. You could go first.
Okay, I completely agree with Ali, and I would say that it will also give the student a better opportunity to remember the experience in a good way. Because imagine that you go to a country and you're very hard, like you cannot even understand what people are saying and you cannot be understood. That will leave you like such a bad memory of your experience studying abroad. Instead, if you can speak the language, you can also, I think your self-esteem will increase too, because you're gonna be you're going to have a situation where you're going to practice the language, and when you see that you understand what people are asking you or that they're telling you and you can reply them back, well, that's a really good feeling. At least that it was for me. And I think, like when you come home, you can say like, yes, my experience abroad was amazing, but what even cooler was to learn a new language and to be able to speak and communicate with more people with a different background than me.
Ivy, I know you had something to add as well.
Yeah, to add on to what Ellie said, I think a benefit of like learning language while you're abroad is that you could find local gems. For example, I made friends with with one of the Japanese students at TUJ, and because I was able to speak Japanese, we were able to get along. And with knowing Japanese, I found lots of places that I would not find on like English sites of where to go in Tokyo. So that's also a benefit to find, I guess, more local hotspots.
For me, I think it's really interesting, like learn the language while you study in another country, with that country language and other country language as well. So for example, when I study in Vietnam, I study Korean. And when I study Korean, I know what the component of the culture aspect of it. For example, when we're talking about kimbap, which is a food in Korean. So from the name of kimbap, we learned that the ingredients of the kimbap including two main ingredients, the kim, which means the seaweed of it, and the pap would mean the rice. So when we learn that, the combination of that, we know what is in there, what we should expect from that food and stuff like that. And similar when you learn in English, when I came here, some work they have a combination of things. Um, international is internation. So like the compile that we know that what is the meaning of the word that we implement, tend to speak more, how we understand the word more.
I think that it also gives, because like while you go to other countries to learn about their culture, I think it gives people there the opportunity to ask about our own culture, and they may not have the experience to communicate. For instance, if they went to the US and they didn't speak English. So I went to a Spanish university. In all of my classes, I was the only person from the US, only person who spoke English. So I was called on a lot to like, what do you guys do in America? What is this about? And people were asking me really a lot of questions because they were curious and they had never really had the opportunity or didn't have, I guess, like an authentic way of asking someone aside from social media or TV or things like that.
Okay, yeah, I mean, so many of you are hitting on such, I think, interesting and important points that when we talk about some of the, you know, benefits of studying abroad, you know, one of the big things is having that opportunity to put yourself in an uncomfortable position, because that's how we learn, right? When we kind of like hit a wall and don't really know how to move forward, and then you have to change what you're doing. When you're studying a language, and I heard Victoria talking about this in particular, you know, when you're studying a language, you're kind of creating those opportunities for yourself, right? Those opportunities to put yourself in an uncomfortable position. And as so many of you mentioned, at the time it's embarrassing or it's uncomfortable or whatever, but then in retrospect, it's funny, and you have that confidence. And as you know, Ellie and Victoria mentioned, and Liam, the vulnerability that you mentioned too, right? Of you know, again, just kind of putting yourself in that uncomfortable position, or Zaria in a position of being kind of singled out and having to think about your own culture too. And then, you know, Ivy, your mention of that kind of inside look too, right? Of being able to, you know, understand you know, the good places to go that wouldn't necessarily be on a map for somebody who doesn't speak the language, and really understanding that, you know, what it is that you're surrounded by, you know, when you order something off a menu, being able to, you know, tease apart that word and know what it is that you're ordering, instead of just needing to memorize it. You really have an understanding of what it is that you're eating. So I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about part of the title for this session is cultural humility. And cultural humility is a concept that originated in healthcare, but it's no longer limited to really just healthcare. And it's a concept of living and working in intercultural spaces that goes beyond just kind of knowing things about somebody else's culture. So if I can read to you, I just want to read to you kind of the official or unofficial definition of cultural humility, and I'd like to talk about it. So the National Institutes of Health defines cultural humility as, let me see here. So it says a lifelong process of self-reflection and self-critique, whereby the individual not only learns about another's culture, but one starts with an examination of their own beliefs and cultural identities. So cultural humility is really more of an approach to intercultural connection rather than, you know, a specific skill set or a specific knowledge base. And among other things, one of the hallmarks of this concept is really striving to understand our own identities and our own positions along kind of various spectrums of relative power and privilege. So with that concept in mind, I wonder what your thoughts are on studying in a culture outside of your home culture, and how that informed your understanding of your own culture and your own, you know, your own identity. And Zaria, I know you touched on this a little bit already, but yeah, I'm interested to hear from others, you know, how has studying abroad helped you understand yourself?
I would say for me, it's very interesting because I feel like I really felt this after my first year in the US, because like I grew up in a small country, Czech Republic. Not many people know what it is, like where it is, is it part of Russia? Like, do you guys have cars, you know? So for me, growing up, I was always like, oh, I wish I was like from one of those like great countries like France, Spain, US, like a country everyone knows. But like coming here, I like started to really appreciate, like it's funny because by leaving my home, I actually really started to appreciate like my background and my roots. And I was like, wow, like I actually like really love my country, like I love my culture. And like this is not because like I have a terrible time in the US and I'm like, I want to go back. Not at all. It's just like, I was just like, wow, like I actually like being Czech. Like actually, I'm like actually like learn through like leaving home and living, like immersing myself into a whole like another culture. Like I think I like learned how to love my own culture and my personal backgrounds, which was like a really interesting and surprising process for me.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And I would just say that I left Italy with the idea to come to the US to be like in one of the coolest countries in the world and to learn the language and to have a new experience, to get out of my comfort zone. And then when I came here, I realized a lot of differences compared to Italy. For example, I was shocked to see how people get coffee here because they just grab the coffee and then leave. In Italy, you must sit and you spend like at least few hours just to talk with the person you're meeting with. And for me, that was like, it's still shocking to see, like, because for me, the idea of taking a coffee, it means we're gonna spend at least 2 hours together and we're just gonna talk. And before I didn't realize how important that was for me, but after I came here and then went back home again to meet with my friends, I discovered that I really miss that part. And I'm really proud to be part of a culture that take the time also to take a coffee. In Italy, we just have espresso. It's just a very small shot, but for us, it just lasts at least 2 hours. So I'm really proud of that part of the culture.
Piggybacking off of that, I actually like after my time in Spain, I like find myself like looking up on Google here, like coffee shops I can sit at. And I think like now looking like after hearing what you had to say, something I now notice is that like we do have a very quick way of life, like in the United States. And I think there are definitely advantages to that. I mean, I obviously grew up in that, so that's where I find comfort. You know, I find comfort in the quickness of going into Starbucks and then leaving with my coffee and then not taking the time to enjoy that. I think that's also something that I've learned to really appreciate about like other countries. I mean, I wouldn't. So yeah, I think the quickness of my country, I definitely like. I appreciate it, but I got to see what it's like to not necessarily live in like a hustle and bustle environment.
I would say back in my country, we didn't drink much of coffee. I really didn't even know what coffee was. So I knew what it was, but I didn't know what it tasted like that much till I got to America. Um, I would say we drank a lot of tea though, but it's different because we used milk and something else, not just the tea bags. So that was one thing that was a shock to me when I said I wanted tea and they gave me water in a bag when I went to Starbucks. That was a little bit, it was a lot different because I was shocked. I was expecting something entirely different. Um, I would say when I got to America, one thing I found very, very different that made me respect my country more or like miss my country more. One is the food. That's a different topic, but it's the way we treat adults. Like we use sirs and mas and we use, the respectful languages. But I realized that you call people older than you here by their first name. And I found that very, 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 very uncomfortable because I would rather call you Mr. or Mrs., your last name, than to call you your first name. Even till now, I still call my boss a first name with some, it's a fear that, oh my God, she's way older than me and I'm saying her first name. Like in Nigeria, you cannot, it's just the way we respect adults or the way we treat adults. I found that a very big culture shock. And sometimes I find myself sleeping by, like I sleep once in a while by saying Mr. this or Mr. that, or I say ma'am and sir. And then someone corrected me and said, that's my father's name. And I'm like, well, I don't know what to call you, but I'm not calling you your first name. But I think that was a very, very different experience for me. And I'm grateful because I get to understand how you respect your adults, how you treat your adults in Nigeria, and how you treat adults here too. It's not like it's a form of disrespect by calling them first name. It's just a form of endearment or something like that. So that was a great experience.
So Tosin, I think you really touched on something there in terms of what we kind of consider to be normal changes, right? When we study abroad or even when we just make friends with somebody who's from a different place or from a different culture. Do any of you have stories about that. I'd like to hear about, you know, any kind of moments when you realize something that you just thought was common sense was actually influenced by your home culture, and not actually a universal way of doing things or seeing the world.
I think that in the US, we're a very isolated and individualistic country. So simple things like keeping my door closed, like my door's closed right now, that's not okay in Spain or in Ecuador. And that was a weird culture shock because I would come home and I would close my door to like be in my room or do homework or whatever. And both of my host moms had told me that, oh, well, no, you need to leave your door open. You have to come sit in the living room. And it's very social, it's very interactive, which is great because, you know, you're immersed, you're talking, but it's also nice to like wind down and be by yourself. And I don't think certain cultures emphasize that as much as maybe we do here in the US. And that was very different because I found myself getting drained because I was social 24/7 for months on end. And I would be like, oh, no one's home. So I can like go lay in my bed and be by myself for an hour, which I had very little time to just relax and be by myself because it wasn't the normal thing to do.
For me, it's kind of different because my country dominantly gonna be Buddhism. And when we're talking about, when I came to America, we're talking about Christian or um, religious different and stuff like that. It's gonna deal with the society different also. So as before, we're talking about culture as the material and non-material value. When one generation transfer to the next generation and go it over and keep it over and over again. And when we're talking about that, when different culture with the history of them compared to its other, maybe the same or longer, when you deep in another culture would different from when I deep in another culture would different from myself, it's gonna be a really surprise thing. We call it culture shock or some stuff like that. And to prevent the thing that I'm gonna assimilate to the culture or keep my culture with myself, we have the cultural humility, and also we are talking about cultural competencies. The why we call out the term cultural humility nowadays, to point out why is there the differences and why do we need to respect each other in the same society. Instead of use cultural competency when you prioritize one culture over another culture, what you have put the standard in there to healthcare and also in the way you interact with other people. And for me, it's really surprised like how when we talk about different privilege of the people in this society and this country, compared to minorities, and how it's going to affect on myself as a person of color and stuff like that. When we study in a culture, what they have an expectation and privilege for travel certain group of people. So when we think about that, we think how we justify our way to be in that society and also know and learn about that society to be fit in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. I think that is such a good explanation, and I know you're in health professions, so you have a deep understanding of cultural humility and the importance of that distinction, right? Because when we talk about cultural competence, we can kind of talk about knowing what the correct norms are. For example, whether you shake hands or do you bow, and those kinds of like facts and knowledge about another culture. But cultural humility is a concept that really is focused on not just self-reflection, as you said, but really understanding our place in terms or our position in terms of power, positions of power, and how that can manifest itself, not just when we're talking to somebody or working with somebody from another country, but also within this country, that cultural humility was created as a US concept, and thinking through some of those power inequities among different groups of people in the US. So yeah, thanks for that, Hua. So what about kind of your previous perceptions of your host country? So I think a lot of us, before we go somewhere, we have kind of an idea of what it's going to be like. What surprised you? What kind of made you think, oh wow, I thought I knew what it was going to be like, but actually I was wrong. What were some of your perceptions of your host country before you went there that ended up being different?
I remember that when I first, do you want to go? I'm sorry, Ali.
Go ahead.
Okay. I remember that when I first told to my friend that I wanted to come to the US, they told me, "Oh, the US is gonna be a very competitive country. You're gonna be by yourself. It's a very individual country, so be careful." And I didn't want to believe them because I thought like that's more a stereotype. And if that was the case, well, I would learn something new. So when I came to the United States, it was not like that. I was a little afraid. I need to confess that, just because being in another country, like I could barely speak the language. But then when I came here, I actually found people that I can relate to, and there are people that are willing to collaborate and help me. So I was really happy to find these people here.
I think for me, it was more like I personally don't try to make these expectations from like already living in a country that like I know that like those like they usually don't come true. Like they're usually not correct, as like Victoria said. But like it was more people around me. Like when I told them I was gonna go to South Korea, they were like, "Oh, like are you sure?" Like because like Asians are like they tend to be like more close-minded, and like you're such a like introverted person, like you like to talk and like you like to share your opinions, and they're like they don't really like that, like they're more introverted. Like what like I don't like even like my family was like, I don't know if you're gonna like it there, like what if you don't make friends there. But like I'm that kind of person that's just like go with my gut, and I was like this feels right for me, and like I'm not gonna let these stereotypes to stand in like what I would like to do. And obviously they proved wrong. Like I had such a great time, I made so many friends, and especially among the young people, like this is like such a bad stereotype that's like not true at all about South Koreans. So that was my experience.
When I was studying in Mexico a few years ago, I had come back from the US from pretty much growing up there. So everybody would see me because I'm like this tall white guy and blue eyes, and I don't have an accent in Spanish. So they would like immediately assume gringo. They'd say I was from the US, and they would like throw all their stereotypes that they had about the US onto me, and they'd say like aren't Americans like so square, they're so stuck up. I was like, I promise you, I know people who are not stuck up in the US, and it's just a matter of being open to when you go there, like just there's no way that everybody in one country is going to be the exact same. You should be open to learning about any individual person. Yeah.
For me, going to Kenya, I didn't really learn anything. I tried to go in there with this kind of blind look at the country, experience everything for the first time. And as I was there, one of the priorities that we had as students was to learn about the history of Kenya and the effects of colonization on wildlife conservation. One thing that surprised me a lot as I was doing my research with the local community is how much they were willing to talk to us. I think, my time in Kenya, you get so involved in what's going on and you realize that the US plays a very strong role in what goes on around the world. A lot of the problems that these people faced were caused by US conservationists forcing people off their lands, restricting their movements, and making their life hard. And what surprised me was just their willingness to talk to American students. It was something special, and it made me feel, like there was hope that one day that Americans could actually hear people's problems that we have created, in a sense.
I also think politics and the media also plays a very important role in the way America is portrayed as a whole. I know while before coming to America, I watched a whole lot of movies, teen dramas, all those movies, just to get some experience or some you know things that might happen if I do come to America. Although it's not going to be 100% true, but I just wanted to know some things and some lingo. That didn't help that much. But in a way, I think they portrayed all the schools, literally all high schools, as bully-filled schools. And I was like, okay, I'll probably get bullied. Hopefully I don't have to do high school all over again. So that was one of the things I feared. Another thing was the way the politics is set up, the way the news cast the politics, thinking America and its politics is the way everybody in America thinks, which is definitely wrong because America is not necessarily its politics. It's people, it's not necessarily its politics. And that gave a lot of people, and that still gives me some, some things I think about when people, my friends from over in Nigeria ask me, so what is this president doing right now? I'm like, bro, I don't believe the news 100%. Because the president does that does not mean it's people who are doing that, And also when I went to Palestine and in Israel, we had this cultural discussion about what the role US plays. And the Palestinians blamed a lot of things on the US. And then the Israeli side said, US is good. So I'm like, I don't know. I'm just here to learn. But it is what it is. Like you should learn, you should do your research, learn from news, learn from videos, movies, but just take everything with a grain of salt.
Yeah, I totally agree with that because I think every place, everything sounds good aspect and a negative aspect of it. But when I was in my country, I thought we would use walking around really easily when I came to the US. And when the first time I came here, I was in Houston, and Houston is, oh my God, a really large city. I cannot walk anywhere on there because everybody use card. I was like, that is too large. I cannot walk in this distance. And I was like, that's really surprised, but I love it. I really love Houston. Houston is the best. Weather is not cold as I expected it. It's hot, like really hot in the summer, and I have to walk on the street. It's terrible, but oh my God, I love Houston. And also I love Philadelphia though.
I think I feared like sort of, the typical American stereotype abroad, I guess, because we all like many of us have already said, like we are kind of seen as this sort of self-centered nation, which like we are, but there are obviously some of us that like want to go abroad and learn about other cultures. And while I think we grow up being very ignorant of other cultures, I mean, we do, it's a fact. But I was afraid that going abroad, people would like mistake my misunderstanding for ignorance, I guess. I don't know if I'm using the right words. I'm really bad at articulating myself sometimes, but I've actually found that like at least like with my host family, they're like, no, like we love teaching you, like, and I found that like walking around in Oviedo, like everyone wants to help you out, it's a really like friendly place. And obviously there are like the stereotypes of like, because people see us as this like political machine where like Trump, we all support Trump or we all support Biden, when obviously that isn't the case. So I think it was really interesting to see that we aren't always seen as like the stereotypical American.
So many of you have commented on sort of the importance of counteracting stereotypes, because as we know, I mean, stereotypes are, it's been said they rob people of their dignity, right? And so I wonder your thoughts on what role studying language in particular, what role did that play, if any, in your approach to, or your ability to approach your study abroad with an open mind, or in a way of counteracting some of those stereotypes? Maybe not. So, okay. So another question that I have is, because we're getting close to the time of questions from the audience. I'd like for you to talk a little bit about how you think your study of language and study of other cultures, how do you think that is going to impact your future, future work that you want to do, either in your career or just as a person?
I think it will have a positive impact for me. I want to be a consultant in the future. And I think being in the business world is important to have an open mind. And I think studying languages and being in another country helped me understand that the way I do things may not be always the right way to do things. And it's also very nice to learn new ways to do things. And I think this is going to be very beneficial, especially because nowadays we have a lot of diversity, and I think it's essential for everyone to know how to interact with people and how to be careful not to offend people, because sometimes we may not even realize that we're offending people. So I would say that studying abroad should be, actually for me, should be a must for everyone, because it's something that make you grow a lot as a person first, but then it's going to have a positive impact for all your life, from like your professional life, relationship life, and so on.
I'm graduating this year, so I'm actually applying for full-time positions currently. And I plan to go to law school, but I'm taking a gap year too. But all the positions I applied for either suggested foreign language as a requirement or a plus or a preference. And some of the interviews I've had, they've actually specifically talked about my study abroad experience and the fact that I can speak Spanish and how that'd be useful at their firm or, their legal advocacy. So I think that it absolutely helps you, like, because I'm experiencing that right now.
Yeah, to add on to what she said, like by knowing another language, it could give you kind of a competitive edge on the market. And wherever you end up working, it gives them access to a wider market or audience because you know a different language.
I mean, my end goal is to be like an educator. I would love to like teach Spanish or possibly teach English abroad for a little bit. And for me, studying abroad was always a must, because how am I gonna like teach or share about like a language or culture that isn't even my own, that I just have such a huge appreciation for, and like it just brings me so much joy, but like I need to go experience it firsthand so that I can spread that to like my future students and inspire them to do the same thing.
I'm an international business major, so I'm planning on like obviously working somewhere abroad. I don't know where yet. That will be decided. I still have time. But so for me, like studying a new language is like very like eye-opening, and especially like with Korea, like it helped me to fall in love with the country so much that I'm like actually like actively looking for like summer internships there, because like I would love to come back there and maybe even work there in the future.
I think studying abroad has actually made me more comfortable with going to an entirely new place to go learn or to go do other things. I plan on moving out of the US eventually, after maybe a few years, to go to the UAE to actually go stay there or maybe study there or do something there. And I'm actually looking forward to it because I know that I will eventually find my comfort zone. I'll eventually find my place in the universe, where I can, understand the place, understand the entire place. So I think you just have to be patient and know that eventually you're gonna get it. It's a very good eye opener. You might think you cannot do it. You cannot just leave your home. You cannot just go to a place where you cannot speak even a single syllable. But eventually, you will figure it out. So that's my take from everything.
For me, I think language is really amazing. I didn't really care about studying language. My mom said, hey, you need to study English because you're going to study abroad. I was like, no, 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 I hate it because I got really bad grade when I studied English in middle school and high school. I was like, I'm not going to study it. And so I decided to study French and Korean. And eventually I end up in the United States, which is something is really cool. And I really, I have to learn it at like a really beginning, like how to communicate, how to talk with other people. And from that, I learned how to grow myself in professional way, how to apply my English skill, the language skill, and the career that I pursued. And also how to communicate with the people who I love, my friends in the United States, and other people come from another country where they know I also speak English. I can have one more chance to communicate with them. So that is how amazing it is, and especially for food. What's in food and the whole scene of it had everything from that. It's really amazing. And because people need to eat, the more you learn about a language, the more you know, hey, I want to eat the pizza, that specific pizza, or I want to eat that specific pasta. Yes, that one. And then you got it. That is how strong it affects my life right now. And that is amazing.
I would completely agree with Hua, but also just studying abroad or learning a new language is enriching in countless ways. And maybe just simply by making friends. Like I'm a communication and social influence major. So just, learning a language or any new way to communicate what you have to say, or a way to listen to other people, is a way to open countless more doors, to learn new things and new experiences. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your thoughtful stories. I really enjoyed hearing all of your stories. And I know that for me, studying abroad and studying another language in particular was really just one of the most fun and exciting things that I've ever done. But I think your stories really show that global education is fun, but it's about so much more than that, right? There's so much opportunity for just really transformative meaning making. So thank you so much. And I do want to take a look at some of these questions that we have in the chat. And Evan, maybe you can help me out here.
Yeah, for sure. So Mylam asked a question. I wonder if you can explain your experience related to COVID-19, how it changed around you. So I know that many of you were actually studying abroad when the pandemic began. And on the other hand, presumably the rest of you were here in the US studying at Temple at the beginning of the pandemic. So perhaps without going into too many like nitty-gritty specifics about COVID-19, but more so about perhaps the cultural perception of the pandemic, if you can relate it to American culture and how it's perceived here, but also your host country or your home country as well.
I was in Spain when the pandemic was going on. So just to keep it brief, I got to Spain in the beginning of January. We watched about COVID in Wuhan every single day in the news. So we were completely aware. but it was very much so, this is in China, it's not going to touch us, like this is just so unfortunate. And then fast forward to like the end of February, beginning of March, it started hitting Europe, and then that's when people started getting scared. But where I was in Spain, like we never, I mean, no one really paid attention to it. They told us not to buy masks. The stores didn't even sell them. So it didn't, I think the really drastic change was when Trump closed the borders. And I think that's kind of when a global shift happened, because I was on a flight 2 days later. So it went from, this is so sad and nothing's going on, but it doesn't affect my life, to I'm now going home and my study abroad's being cut short. So it was really, really quick change.
Yeah, it's kind of the same experience for me. As weird as it sounds, I didn't really hear about COVID-19 just because I was in, rural Kenya and I barely had Wi-Fi, until my program actually got canceled and we all had to be like evacuated almost overnight. I was in the national park one day, and 24 hours later, I was back in New York. It was a major shift. And for me, it's like the whole world just turned upside down. I went from normal life and I come back because, you hear about this virus going on, and you get to JFK and suddenly everyone's staying away from each other. No one's talking to each other. You're told to just like keep to yourself while you're waiting for your flight. So it was just very surreal for me.
For me, it was really interesting to see this sort of 2 week delay. I was in Europe when like things started to get bad there, and through my phone, I would see everything is fine because obviously all my connections on social media are like from the United States. So I was kind of living in one reality versus looking through my phone at another. And it was a really interesting experience because then when I did get back, I kind of had to relive like my past 2 weeks of like worry and chaos and sort of just the unknown of it all, because I left. I Once the program sort of stopped, I was on a flight the next day as well. It was like a 24-hour turnaround for me, but it was really interesting to see how Spain handled it, and then following 2 weeks, the United States handled it. Definitely.
Okay.
For me, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
For me, I am still in the US, and I was still in the US when it all happened. But the main thing was dealing with my family calling me and letting me know what is going on. Stop, don't go outside, monitoring you from thousands of miles apart. But it was a pretty shocking experience for me and for my family, because they were very, very scared for me, and like they really were monitoring every step just because of the fear. And I also couldn't go back because the border was closed and things like that. But so far in Nigeria, thankfully, it's not as bad as I was actually expecting. For some reason, they found a good way to curb a lot of it. And I don't know how they did it. I am not even sure how it's happening right now, but I'm so glad that happened. And I hope things change over here too.
Okay, thanks for sharing. I'm going to move on to the next question because we do have a bunch and only a few minutes left. But I see 2 or 3 related comments here about why is it that in schools, or why do we think that in American schools, primary, secondary education, and post-secondary universities, that languages are not required, while in other countries it seems like it is required to learn a second language. So what do you think it is about the culture, the US culture or culture abroad, that would require that?
I think because in the US people speak English, and it's a language that like is one of the most spoken language in all the world. For example, I'm from Italy, such a small country, and Italian is only spoken like in Italy. And that's why I think our education system realizes that we need to know more languages for us to be more successful in our lives. And that's why we start, I think we start our first year of school, we start learning about English. And then when we go to middle school, we either learn Spanish or French. And I feel like at the end of my education, I know how to speak English. And I feel like also other European countries know how to speak English. And that may be why the US doesn't see a need to learn how to speak other languages since they can speak English, and instead they focus more on other classes that may be more helpful for their culture.
I agree with Victoria. I also think it's because US in general is more isolated than like European countries are, because like for me, I can drive 2 hours on a highway and I'm in Germany where they speak a completely different language. So like I feel like, for example, if like in US, like each state would speak different language, right? Like similar to Europe, how like each country there speaks different language, then people here would be more enforced to learn new like different languages because like they wouldn't understand each other as easily as they do now. But like it's funny because like at the same time America is a country of immigrants, right? There's so many people coming from different countries. There's a huge Hispanic population, especially on the West Coast. So I guess I don't have like a general question answer to that, but this is probably why I think that is.
This is a subject like I'm really interested in, as like I study education, and I took a bilingual education class here at Temple, and we just sort of spoke about those differences between the US and other countries. And you see like countries in Europe, they like adopt like a mother tongue plus 1 or 2 languages. Meanwhile, in the United States, we focus on more of like a substitution of language, where if you come from another country, like we actually want you to we want you to speak English instead of your mother tongue, which obviously like I don't agree with that. But I think it's super interesting. And I think part of it is with like the isolation of the United States, where like you can be very sort of, your entire life can happen within the United States, whereas in other countries, there's more possibilities outside. Yeah.
Well, we're at our time. I know there were some other really good questions. And so I hope that we can continue these conversations in other ways. That is one good thing about, virtual, is that it can bring folks together in different time zones and those kind of things. So I just want to thank everyone so much for this really, I think, invigorating conversation. I want to invite you all to attend some of the other events that are happening this week. It looks like tomorrow, one of the events, we're having global perspectives on social movements, unrest and dissent in 2020. Sounds really exciting. That's at 9:30. And a few on Friday as well. So I can, if you don't already have it, let me just drop the schedule into the chat. We really hope that you can attend some of the other events this week. The QR code is there for Fox students who need that. And Suzanne, what am I missing?
No, that's great. I think if you're interested in seeing any of the previous e-global learning examples from this semester. So for example, Temple Rome has done a really great job. I know Daniela Curioso is here, one of our professors from Temple Rome, creating culture and language labs that were done initially for the Italian classes here on main campus, but they are now available for all of you. And they're on our website that you can see here. And we have, there are some from Japan as well. And some of the other virtual tours of Rome and Japan and other things that we've done are available online. Friday, we're doing a global student debrief where students will be talking about what they gained from attending the other sessions this week too. So a lot of exciting things. And if you missed any of the previous sessions this week, they are also being posted to the website. So you could take a look at the sessions from Monday and yesterday as well.
Well, thank you all for coming, and I hope you have a great rest of your night or day, wherever you are, and a great rest of your week. Bye.
Bye, thank you.
Thank you very much.